The hour arrived to call the meeting to order. The first order of business will be the review of the November 8 minutes. I hope everybody went up on Gmail and read these, because they're long.
I will move the minutes be accepted as distributed.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? We're done with the minutes. I have been asked, I've got to get a pen, been asked to change the agenda slightly because this is the season for school concerts and one of our speakers needs to go to one. So with that, I'm going to take item 6 and move it up ahead of new business. So Mr. McDougall, if you would.
Thanks for that. I appreciate that. Again, my name is Shane McDougall. Do a couple things. I'm leading the airport committee, the newly established airport committee. We started back in, I can't remember now. It's probably May or June anyway. So we've been doing this for a couple months. We meet monthly. And Ken actually brought it to my attention that we should actually try to coordinate some of our activities with what the planning board's doing. There's certainly some stuff at the airport that, as far as development goes, that could benefit the city. And so tonight I just want to do like an introductory type. Here's what we do. Here's the airport. My day job, what I do is I actually do a lot of my work was with airports. We design it. We construct runways, aprons, taxiways, all that stuff. So basically I just wanted to kind of go through what we do. And this is basically the airport layout plan. This is developed through a project. It shows the airport property, which is this right here. It shows the existing features, both runways. If I zoom in here a little bit more, right here, it'll show the terminal area. This is the terminal building. This is Tom's Hangar. This is future development. They've got a future partial parallel taxiway. Here's the NOAA weather station. Shows approaches. This is a runway protection zone. And there's all kinds of information here. I'm not going to go through explaining it tonight. But basically this is the roadmap for the airport and future development. Now, one of the things, just got a checklist here. So the other thing that the city receives grant funding, federal funding, to do a lot of these projects, and so there's grant assurances, and so anything that's done in the airport has to abide by those. And there's 26 or 28 of them. And again, I won't go into those, but they make sure that whatever revenue is being generated on the airport property goes back to the airport, other things like that. And certainly this is something that we can get into as we start looking at development and projects. One of them is land lease stuff. Any leases that we do, the city needs to get fair market value for. Development. So you can see there's a fair amount of, so this is Public Works up here. There's the old trailer park. And there's still a few trailers in here, but this is all area of development, and we've started developing with that with the T hangar that's there. We've done a couple of taxi lanes. The other area of property that could be used for development is this southerly property. Now there's some terrain features in there, and there's certainly some water, but there's a lot of property here that if you go through the process would be deemed non-aeronautical use. So there'll be this parcel and maybe this parcel here. And when it's deemed non-aeronautical, that means that one of two things can happen. We can use that to lease out developments to whatever businesses and gain revenue from that, or we can actually go. What I'm doing in Old Town right now is they have a similar project where they've got a parcel of land here that was deemed that, and we were actually releasing that property from all the federal obligations. What that allows them to do is to actually sell that property, and that's what they're doing. They've got, back 10 years ago, they built a $1 million road into the airport. they've had all this development, but they've only been able to lease it. People don't want to lease stuff; they want to buy, or companies do anyway. So that could be something that could be done in these areas here. It gets released, and now the new airport property line, comes across and comes down. Now all that stuff has to, be. It all has to be in coordination with all the design standards and the airspace. Obviously, you don't want to be sticking up towers right here next to an airport. You guys all can see why that would be an issue. So there's all kinds of regulations. I deal with them day in and day out, so I know it fairly well. But again, as we move forward and maybe meet to see what some of those development areas are, we can flush out some of those deals, issues. But City of Old Town's been very successful at doing it, and we've helped them do that. They've got 2 businesses now going in, and they've got 1 federal entity that is looking to move into their airport. So there's space there. There's utilities there along North Main Street here. So there's a residential neighborhood. Obviously, you guys know where that residential neighborhood is here that abuts that. So there's some potential there. So really, that just a quick nutshell. That's what I'm here to present, and look forward to maybe future meetings as far as what can we do as combine forces to look at whether it's rezoning, whatever it is, and maybe developing some of that property.
There's actually one project that we have in common with the airport and also with the Kirby Utilities District. It's the old sewer line that runs through what used to be the trailer park and hooks onto the terminal building.
What line?
Sewer line.
Oh, sewer line, okay.
So it needs to be, what they had envisioned was to slip line it so they could replace it. Basically, CUD is concerned about the freshwater infiltration into the sewer lines. The Department of Environmental Protection frowns upon that. It overwhelms the sewer plant in the springtime. So that's a project right now that needs to be done. There are issues with that sewer line that do connect with the airport property.
When would you like to meet with us with more detailed discussions on anything? Or is that to be determined?
Yeah, probably to be determined, but maybe this spring sometime. I think we've got 1 or 2 meetings. We meet once a month, so I think the first couple meetings we're going to try to develop. We're going to do hopefully 2 or 3 events, maybe 4 events. We did 1 last year, so I think the beginning of this year is try to plan those out so that we can get those. But after that, if we can set an agenda, and I can work with directly with you and set that up.
Work through Ken.
Yep. Okay.
And you'll keep me apprised.
Yep.
That's assuming I'm still in his chair next month. We'll see.
Fair enough. Yep. Any other questions?
No, I'm good. Any on the board, Andy?
Well, feel free to contact me if you do.
I have a question more from the airport as a pilot type of thing that I've been wondering about, and that is the remaining fuel in the fuel tank at the airport. When it is all gone, presuming that someday will happen, is the city or anybody looking to add some more to it? Or is that too far in the future to speculate?
We added fuel to it, I think it was back in October this last year.
Oh, so you have already?
Yeah, we didn't fill it all the way up.
Right.
We are adding new fuel to it to make sure it's mixed and make sure it meets all the quality standards.
So because I didn't know if when the tank ran empty that it was going to stay empty, since there was no FBO to encourage sales or whatever.
The city is kind of playing that role right now.
Yeah, we are managing the pumps and we're monitoring the prices and everything else.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
And by the way, I sorry, didn't mean to forget Dave. Dave's a vice president. Yeah. Co-chair of the airport committee, Dave Barbosa. So.
Hi, Dave.
Yeah. And we've got 4 other members that couldn't make it tonight. But
Dave, aren't you also involved in Civil Air Patrol?
I am.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
It's good. Good to have you here.
Thanks.
Anything else? Well, thank you, Shane.
yeah, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Go to your concert.
Yep.
We've had some folks come in since the meeting was called to order that need to sign in. There's a sign-in sheet over on that table. Appreciate it. Okay, moving on to new business. Final reconsideration of a home occupation application for Jen Anderson, which is an in-house physical massage facility.
Right. We did consider this and actually passed it, except that the application itself wasn't quite complete. Since then, she's added the map of the north arrow and the sign locations and things like that. It's complete and awaits your signatures.
I thought we had made that contingent upon it meeting all the requirements as well with regards to ADA and everything like that.
Didn't have to be ADA.
Doesn't have to be.
That was settled that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that was covered and
Yeah.
that was all
Yeah,
taken care
that
of.
that was talked about.
Okay.
So did we actually vote to sign this, or should we do that now?
I thought we did.
I thought we
actually.
had to.
Yeah.
What are your
You
minutes?
passed it, but
All
it
right.
needed to be completed, so
Right,
I'll
so-
pass it forward for signature.
Yeah, pass it around for signatures. That will
Before
take
we
care of
walk out.
it. Before we leave. The next is a building permit for 2 Aldrich Drive. Is that 2 or 82?
2.
2, okay.
So we actually talked about this application again at the November 8th meeting. It was thought that we should seek legal advice in that regarding section 25 of our code book that allows some application of a residential activity happening on an industrial site. So since then, we have had our legal opinion. It's brief.
Yeah, so I read it.
And basically states that this activity is authorized under section 25.
For the audience's benefit, this is an ongoing discussion about an application to install a mobile home as a residence in an industrial zone. And we have one little paragraph in our zoning that says that can be done if it's the purpose of the residence is coincidental with the business, has something to do with the business, like a watchman or someone with the business living there. And so we did send that out to the city's attorney, just to make sure that we were on the right track. And evidently, he has come back and said, yeah, we're okay to approve it. Anyone on the board have further discussion on that one? We spent a lot of time on that last time. Well, I would entertain a motion that we authorize our CEO to go ahead and let that happen.
I'll make that motion.
Any second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, that will go on.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Now we're back to Dunkin' Brands. One of the reasons we're back is because, due to my oversight, when we reviewed the site design application last time, we did not go down through the page and a half of criteria that we are supposed to decide upon. My bad.
This is true, but we did approve this conditionally, so it's still open.
Yeah. I was very relieved when you told me that.
We have since heard from,
Could you sign in, please, sir? Thank you.
we have since heard from John Witten, who's the architect involved with Plymouth Engineering. They're still waiting on action from MDOT to approve their striping out in the road, so their transportation planning. I included a diagram that you should find at your seats tonight.
Yep.
That shows the turn lane being extended all the way to North Street. So that turn lane is going to be introduced as part of the school project from High Street up Bennett Drive. Would be extended all the way to North Street under
Okay.
their plan.
Part of what they've got drawn on there, they show the entrance to RSU 39, but they show it as like a paved way with a gate. I don't think that's going to. I don't believe that that's accurate, is it? Isn't that going to be Canvas fence all the way up,
That's
thought
the,
that's
that's
where
an
it's
emergency entrance.
Emergency.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
that.
With a gate.
because that was on the other side. I thought that was on the park, or on the Glen Street side.
It's on Bennett Street.
It's on Bennett, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for fire trucks.
They'll give you a key, Phil.
So the turn lane is going to, has it been extended to accommodate Duncan?
That is their proposal, but the Department of Transportation hasn't answered them back yet.
Well, they only submitted their permit to them
Oh.
on the 11th.
So-
MDOT only received their traffic movement permit on the 11th.
So this map is just Duncan's
Right.
desire. It's not MDOT.
Their conversations with MDOT go back to 2016, with Goral Palmer, I believe, doing the transportation study. So it's an ongoing thing.
They've had this discussion going for 2 years.
Where does the proposed turning lane stop as it is right now? Is it right in front of Irving? More or less?
There's not currently a turning lane on Bennett Street.
No, for the one that's proposed for the
There's
school.
one
the
proposed
MDOT is
for the
gonna do.
school.
Because they want to extend it, but I'm just wondering how far they want to extend it. I thought that ended at South Park Street, if I remember correctly.
And go check.
That would make sense, Phil.
Plans in the office.
Unless they extended it in the other direction so that traffic coming south would have a turn lane into the school as well.
Right.
They don't need a turn lane, so.
True.
Well, maybe
okay.
it was then maybe it's closer to the side of the Bennett side.
I don't recall if
Okay.
it's sitting right on my work table, but
It wasn't.
Yeah,
So
it wasn't
at
really
least-
far.
but it was-
It wasn't far.
At least there's been a little progress. They're still talking to MDOT. And haven't heard anything. I have a funny feeling that not much is gonna happen
over the holidays.
till after the New Year's. But that doesn't mean we can't go through this list.
Well, I think we should wait.
You wanna wait?
I think we need to wait.
I think so.
Because, I mean, not only does the MDOT permit create some issues, but they have a verbal agreement for a purchase sale agreement, so they don't have anything necessarily in hand with regards to part of what they need for their site design review. I still see some traffic issues based on our ordinances within the parking lot that I think that need to be addressed. With regards to movement of traffic and it not to be impeded in any way for an exit lane. Because based on what he'd said to us at the last meeting is that they were gonna have the people who have the Dunkin' to Go app basically be able to pull in front of that, or just after that order station. So if you've got 3 or 4 people waiting at that place to pull in, then you're impeding the traffic looping around in order to exit from the structure. Then everybody's gonna start using the exit onto Angle Street, which is not intended for. So I think we need to address that as well. Just on those couple of things alone, I think we should hold off on this before we do anything. Because they're not planning on breaking ground until March or April, so, you know, if it takes us another meeting or two to get things squared away, I just think it needs to be done right.
I'm willing.
And given the fact that, you know,
I'm willing to have it be tabled, because if they don't get MDOT approval,
right,
We have nothing to talk about
our
anyway.
time. Right.
everyone agree with that?
Want a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we table this till they have MDOT approval, and then we can
How long?
finalize it further.
How long would that be, though? I mean, are we?
They're waiting on it,
I-
on the Maine Department of Transportation.
I've had
I can't say
communications
what that would be.
with the person who's doing the permitting in Presque Isle, and he said typically it takes a couple weeks, but given the holidays, they probably won't have anything till the first and middle part of January, so.
So we may see this again in January, we may not see it till February.
Right.
I guess my only concern would be if we keep pushing it back, and I mean, I hate to turn businesses away that are looking to be active in our community and helping us out in a positive business.
But
I mean,
They're
and I
like-
understand that.
their lack
the
of
rules
planning
like
to
that.
have everything in a row doesn't make it a priority for us. You know, they have to make sure that they jump through the same hoops as do we. So I think we need to table it till we have an MDOT traffic permit approved from the state.
We have that issue, we have a list of issues raised by our professional staff that's part of the record. When it comes time to go down through this checklist, it's not gonna take long. So I think we can just go ahead and
And it's
take
still in
one.
the right direction because it's contingent upon these things, so it's not like
Right,
we're
they can't do
doing
anything without a main traffic
Right.
permit. So.
I believe the contractor is aware of that as well.
Yeah.
Should we?
But some of those nuances, like I said, with regards to traffic flow based on our ordinances, concerns me. I think we need to address as well. So,
Okay, Tom has seconded the motion.
Discussion.
Yes.
You phrased your motion that we table it until they have a MDOT permit. And I don't know if we want to hold to a MDOT permit or table it until such time as we have response from MDOT indicating that they are going, that is their
they
plans.
need to have a permit. That's the motion. They need to have a permit in order to move forward. So, until they have a permit, then there's no need for us to move forward with it.
Except if the permit, well, I'd hate
If the
for us.
permit drops the day after our next meeting, then we have to wait a whole month, so.
But that's my motion, is that they need to have their permit for that.
Is it all in order except for the permit? Or is there other
There's
issues?
no
This-
purchase and
except
sale
that
agreement.
We didn't go through that.
Well, there's no purchase and sale agreement. They don't have.
They don't have a PNS at all?
No, they don't have ownership of the property. He basically, that's where he kind of strong armed people into forcing this the last meeting. He goes, us getting this done is kind of contingent on having approval for this in calendar year 2018. And that was what he said when he was standing there towards the end.
They've got an oral agreement?
We don't know that. That's what he said, but I mean, there's no documentation that they have a purchase and sale agreement. No, they don't have a traffic permit. It all rests on them. They need to have their ducks in a row before they come back to us with everything that they need.
Okay, I'm gonna call a vote on the motion. All in favor? I will. I see only three. 1, 2, 3. I need more than that. Motion failed. I'm still gonna defer it till, at the very minimum, the next meeting.
So we're tabled.
We're tabling it.
Is that a formal motion?
Do I need a motion to table, or can the chair table? All right.
I'll move that we table it till the next meeting.
Second.
All in favor of that? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. All right, tabled till January.
Mr. Brusha, if you were just here interested in your thing, you're free to leave anytime.
Thank you, all of you.
All right, sir. All right, now the next.
We'll call Stan with a sign permit.
Before I open a public hearing on item D, I'll read a little bit of explanation from CEO on why we're doing a hearing.
Okay. A permit has been sent forth by Mr. Richardson for a retail operation in an R3 zone. So that's certainly an activity that the planning board can okay for an R3 zone. So, and it trips a public hearing. So currently, Mr. Richardson does a medical marijuana, I'll get the terminology right, caregiver status. So that's there, that's legal, that's perfectly within the law. He would like to extend and add on to his services there as a caregiver by having a retail shop as a separate standalone business.
But in the same commodity.
There's two different entryways from the part where I sell medical marijuana
Should you
and where I
come
sell
into the
glass.
stand?
But what you're proposing here is,
Oh, I have to go to the...
Yeah, Darrell, tell us all about it.
not until I open the hearing. I'll call the hearing open at this time.
So we're good right now?
Yep.
All right, cool. All right, so I want to open up a glass store pretty much for the public, so anybody can go in there. That's why there are two different entryways from the glass store to the medical marijuana caregiver office. And I need a permit to pretty much do the glassware store, so that's why I'm here.
Just tell me and the audience what you mean by glassware.
Pipes, bongs, glassware, you know.
Okay, associated with then the use of marijuana.
Yes, sir. Also clothes in there too.
Clothes?
Yeah, like for my brand, for my store. Yeah.
Bob,
Yes.
I gotta abstain. I don't know. I should have told you that before you call it to order.
You're going to recuse yourself?
Recuse, yeah.
All right, that's fine. We can show that in the record.
That's the best thing. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. And there's still 1, 2, 3,
Question.
4, 5 of us. Yes, sir.
Just for the point of order, Commissioner, you may want to just sit down.
Yeah, you'll miss it. Don't go too far. We'll call you back.
No, I'll lurk in the hallway.
Oh, all right. And what you indicated earlier that today's the day that this stuff becomes legal?
No, today is the day that the new, the amended laws for medical marijuana within the state
It still matters.
are in effect.
Okay.
This application is separate from that.
Separate, totally. Okay.
So they have, okay.
The application is for a retail operation in an R3 zone.
Did we or did we not pass an ordinance with regards to recreational marijuana and sales and stuff of that nature?
Currently, there's a prohibition that is the law in Caribou, that there's no retail sales, no clubs.
But did we define,
I remember the
what's our definition based on what we had?
it's not recreational. That's what y'all
No,
term.
no, I understand
yeah.
that, but I mean, if it's in, I want to know what our ordinance says in relation to what you may or may not be selling out of there, so.
I do not believe there's any mention of the
Okay,
paraphernalia.
I wasn't 100% sure, so I wanted to make
Or
sure that
novelties
was
and
noted.
things, hats and
Right.
T-shirts
Right.
and things like that.
Ordinances.
So in the ordinance, we're still allowed, we're still allowed to be able to sell glassware and paraphernalia.
That's
Considering
correct.
he's not selling recreational marijuana, you're a caregiver.
Right.
So, if that's how the ordinance reads.
The only question I have, I guess, is to be educated, updated. I remember back in the day when all marijuana was illegal, I was also under the impression that paraphernalia used with marijuana was also illegal.
It's
And
not illegal until the actual physical glassware is used, and then it was illegal. At that point, before, it's just a piece of glass.
And at which point it's only a civil violation.
Correct.
I guess I'm looking for what's the law today in regards to, I mean, is any and all
It can still be considered, I
paraphernalia?
would dare say it probably can still be considered drug paraphernalia, in which case, it's still a civil penalty, but, I mean,
Again, that goes to the use that Tom
Right.
said.
So for,
if it's used to smoke regular tobacco,
which it could be.
right, it could be, then there's no issue.
Can we ask if there's anybody else in the audience?
Yes,
that is-
I was
is-
getting to that.
Okay.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this issue?
Did they have anything else to add?
I have a concern.
Identify. You want to go to?
Does he
The,
work?
would you move
I gotta
aside?
move. Yeah.
My name's Bob Plord. I reside at 10 Grimes Mill Road, within 500 feet of Mr. Richardson's operation. My concern is, one thing is traffic. I don't understand all the laws on paraphernalia, to be honest with you. One of the concerns I have is that how many people are going to be there and what's going to be happening at that location. The other issue that I have that really upsets me is the odor that comes from this operation to my home. It's pretty pungent odor. And I'm wondering if down the road, when I go to sell my home, if this odor is still there, what value I'll have to my home. Now, when Mr. Richardson went into this operation, there was no letter sent to us like there was to this meeting that what kind of an operation was going to be set up there. I did not receive one. So now I'm just wondering what kind of a mess I'm going to be getting into trying to sell my property to anybody. I don't think anybody around is going to be interested on the board here to buying a home that you smell marijuana all the time. It's an odor that smells like skunk urine or whatever. That's my concern about this whole operation, to tell you the truth. If there's anybody else who'd like to speak up, that's...
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, that prompts a couple of questions.
Actually, I kind of have the same concerns as well. We were never informed of this operation even going to come into our neighborhood. If we'd known about it, we would have stood strong and said, we don't want it here. I know personally I've had the cops at my house multiple times, and I'm not saying you have an illegal operation, but when I find tons of packets of empty Suboxone, somebody's doing something in that neighborhood that they shouldn't be doing. At one point, there was over 100 of them on the side of the road by my home and in the ditch, and it extended down to your property, and I had to pick them up, and I brought them to the police. And the night before that, there was people right outside of my home, and when I followed them down with a flashlight, they were at that property. I'm not saying, I don't know if they're, I'm not even going to get into it, but what I'm saying is, this, I'm sorry, but this is breeding a bad thing in our neighborhood. I don't want it.
I understand that, but what we're here to discuss is the operation itself.
I don't want any of the operation.
Not any prior history.
Right, okay.
We can't.
The glassware itself will bring, if you're saying it's going to be used for cigarettes, great. But we all know it's not. I don't agree with it. The glassware is going to bring more. If it's for medical marijuana, that's great. But we all know once you open an operation, with the laws changing, it's going to not only bring medical marijuana, it's going to bring others. And they bring more with them. So I'm dead set against drugs. I don't want them in my neighborhood. I never wanted them in my neighborhood. If I were to buy a home now in that neighborhood and look at it, I'd see that and be like, I'm not buying in this neighborhood. And I agree. The skunk smell is all through my home. We actually thought it was our dog bringing it in. It turns out it's not. It's the smell. It's not a good influence in our neighborhood. I don't agree with it at all. Sorry.
Thank you.
I'd like, if I can, and I guess I just want to educate some of the people that spoke, and correct me if and where I'm wrong, but when the medical marijuana rules were passed by the legislature, and I will be the first to say that I think it was a very bad piece of legislation. I don't think the whole thing was handled well at all. But the situation was that people were empowered by the legislature to become a medical marijuana caregiver, grow the stuff, and they were to be kept totally anonymous. We, the planning board, were unable to find out who they were or where they were.
No say.
We had zero say in the matter. So when you say you didn't get a letter, well, guess what? We didn't either. We didn't get anything. And that's because of the way the legislature went about this process, which was not a good process. And so I kind of wish it had not gone the way it was, but that is what the legislature did. And so we were caught off guard ourselves. As a matter of fact, we had meetings a year or 2 or 3 ago with the police chief discussing the whole matter. And even he didn't know where the caregivers were in town, and they were to be kept completely anonymous for fear that their crops would be stolen, that they would be targets for burglaries, etc. And so we are where we are, and it's not for this planning board failure to have acted differently in the past. you know, I lay the blame squarely at the state legislature and the way they went about and did it. I think what we have right now is an application in front of us for a retail operation to sell glass and some clothing. And I think that we're kind of obligated to treat it as a retail operation, even though some of the particulars involved are not fondly looked upon by a lot of people. Now, I guess one of the questions I have is, how much parking do you have for your customers at your establishment? This glass shop, I mean, if you have 5 or 10 customers there at one time, do you have ample parking that there will not be any street side parking?
Yes, I've been doing this for like 3 years now. I already have a big parking lot. I had it expanded. I have a parking lot, and
how many cars can you accommodate?
We just did the assessment, and it's 14, 2 of them handicapped.
You say assessment, for who?
For one side of the building, it's 14. So, and then the other side is where the other entrance is. That parking lot hasn't been assessed, but it's larger than this caregiver side.
So the caregiver side has the 14. It's the glassware shop that you're saying is equally as big.
Well, it's bigger.
Or it's larger.
Yes.
Okay.
How many car trips come in currently? And they're only buying product, they're not buying glassware.
Mm-hmm.
On a weekly basis, what do you think?
Well, we have a delivery service that handles most of our orders, our patients.
I ain't really know, maybe like 100 plus a week.
Wow.
Yeah.
I see members of the audience shaking their heads. Public hearing still
a lot more. Well, hey, then there's probably more than that. I haven't really just counted how many people come here.
The wind's blowing, or if you're having a hurricane, the dooryard just gets trapped.
What I don't understand.
And we'll even miss the driveway and end up on the snowmobile trail sometimes.
What I don't understand.
Well, I own this snowmobile trail over there, so it's okay.
The allegation of heavy odor. I know what marijuana smells like, and I don't like it either. But I don't understand if you are providing marijuana for people who have a medical need and they're going home to smoke it, that's one thing. But why do these folks have to?
It's the raw product.
It's not smoke. It's not the smoke.
It's not the smoke.
It's the plant itself gives off an odor.
Oh.
Kind of like broccoli, you know what I'm saying? The broccoli smell like pure doo doo when you drive by it. Yeah. That's pretty much when the weed. Yeah, but I'm saying like the only time you'll smell the weed is when it's time to harvest. That's when the smell comes out. So.
Is it harvest time right now?
Yes, it's harvest time. That's why. Yeah, I've been cutting down trees.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, right now, you're gonna.
Drive by there at 5:36.
Yeah, it does smell really good over there, but.
Done anything to try to mitigate that smell? I know it's a little difficult, but
I don't know how I will be able to be honest with you. I mean.
Have you reached out to other dispensaries to see what you could do to mitigate it? Because I know these things are all across the United States.
What's the question at hand? Just because there's other stuff going on.
And who are you?
I'm sorry, I'm John K-Rod. I live at 644 Main Street in Carroll.
And your purpose for speaking from there instead of here?
Oh, just because they were there? I was just wanted to ask a question.
You want to come up here?
Sure. Just wanted to ask what the question at hand was.
The question at hand is whether they get a permit to open up a glassware store.
Right. So what's that got to do with the smell?
Plenty.
Okay, explain, please.
We have neighbors who are upset with the current operation.
Does the glassware smell?
Are you representing them?
Not at all. No, I was going to show up to listen to the airport discussion if there was going to be one. I just happened to be here, and I'm a citizen. And for the record, never even smoked a cigarette. Don't like it. Don't like weed. Okay.
That's
fine. People have some grievances here that don't seem to have anything to do with a glass shop. And I was just looking up online, and apparently the rules in the United States and in Maine are, as long as these products can be used for something else, there is no power to regulate them.
We're not saying we have
Right.
that power,
Right.
but we do have the
Just,
power.
I was just bringing up the point at hand. It's just a logic thing.
Excuse me, sir.
Oh, go ahead.
We do have the power to allow neighbors to speak, and that's what we're doing.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and
Okay.
that's great.
But
Just trying to. I was
will
just trying to
agree
clear.
that the
I was
odor
just trying to
aspect
clear
of-
this up.
The odor aspect of it right
Yeah.
now isn't what we're here to talk about.
That's true. We can't.
That's
do
what I was
anything
going
about it.
after. And
Thank you.
yeah,
I appreciate
thanks.
that.
That's all.
There are some relevant points that were brought forward by our building inspectors today. One was the parking. I've actually been there on site, and that there is ample parking. That there shouldn't be people parking up Noyes Road or Bog Road. The other one is sanitary facilities. So, and I didn't stop in to the restrooms to see what that was like with that. If you have a lot of people on site, that is an issue. The other issues that may be relevant come back to the new rules that take effect just today. And one is the new definitions of primary caregiver. It's actually divided into two, and one is registered caregiver, and the other is non-registered caregiver. So that doesn't have anything to do with the glass, but as you go on through the edits to the law, it says that there's a municipal opt-in requirement in grandfather registered caregiver retail stores, registered dispensaries, marijuana testing facilities, and manufacturing facilities not operating on the effective date. So before this date of the legislation are prohibited from beginning to operate in a municipality until that legislative body has voted to adopt or amend an ordinance or approve a warrant article allowing such entities to operate. So our task tonight is to see if that applies to this situation or not. And again, this is so new. We saw it like Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
The laws take effect today.
Or is that?
Phil, excuse me.
Hang on. Let me get my question out first before I lose it. Okay.
Wait a minute.
He's the chair.
He's the chair. If he
I'd
says
already-
hold it,
I'd
you
already
hold it.
started.
All I wanted to say was, if people in the audience have no further comment, I will close the hearing and we can continue our discussion.
Ken, I just have a question. Can you tell me how many patients you provide marijuana for?
I don't really have to disclose that information. That's
No,
private. by HIPAA
that's
stuff, yeah,
not
so,
relevant to
yeah.
this discussion, Kat. I'm sorry.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, it just,
They're
there's an
protected
awful
by
lot
that.
of traffic there.
Well, they're all patients and so on.
May I address the chair in regards to that?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
That's not the only business there. There's apartments on the other side of that parking lot. So a lot of the traffic can't solely be like, there's private residences on the other side of that parking lot that do entrance on the same side. So, and then there's other individuals.
I don't understand what you're saying.
As far as traffic, like you
I'm
can't
only
say, like,
concerned about traffic on your property.
It's
It
all
is.
The whole
There's
thing
a
is
chunk
on
of the
property.
road
block
that
is
he
one
owns.
property.
Yeah, there's extended property under the same landowner. There are apartment housing facilities there, further machine shops and so forth as you move down.
And they all use the same parking lot?
I do
There's-
think there's sufficient parking for all the
Okay.
activities going there. I have been there on site.
Then let's eliminate parking as an issue.
Public hearing closed.
It is now. Public hearing is closed. Now, members, questions, comments?
Yes.
I have one.
Okay. Go ahead, Fred,
Drell,
you were first.
the current structure that's there, you said part of it you're going to put your glassware in, the other part is what now?
It's my caregiver side where I sell to my patients. So
Okay.
how I have it set up is
So there's no residents in that structure?
no, not at all.
There's no one residing there?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Kay.
Okay.
I guess the
Excuse me, I was distracted by the exodus. You want to repeat the question and the answer?
My question was just to make sure that there was not a residence in that particular.
So nobody
Oh.
lives there?
Right.
Okay. My turn?
Go ahead.
I guess I'm looking again for education all the time for Ken or our city manager, Mr. Marker. But am I correct in that if somebody brings forth a valid application for which the zoning allows, in this case a retail store selling glassware and hats, etc., and even though that there is numerous neighbors that are objecting to the property, or to the proposal, I should say, numerous objections, that we are obligated to go forward and vote this in the affirmative?
It is not necessarily correct.
It is not.
No. It is true that you have to look at the merits of the application, but in this instance, the basis of the code assumes that you generally have one use on a piece of property. In this case, you can't necessarily separate the single use from all the other uses that are already on there. As a planning board, you can look at, is there a compounding nature to all of the uses that would not be consistent with the city's codes? And so, again, we have to treat the marijuana growing separate from the retail use as far as the use goes, but you still can look at what is the compounding potential of those uses together. Do we need to address the parking as you discussed? Okay. Is there additional concern in the ordinance that talks about lighting, noise, odor? And again, there's some elements that are independent. But can you say that because one is there, that's going to be increasing the potential of the retail establishment, bringing even more impact into the neighborhood than say a glassware business located on a separate piece of property in the downtown area? So part of it may just be that, yes, it appears that there's sufficient parking. Has there been the analysis done, the numbers crunched to say this is actually how many they need? Are they going to be dividing that? Is it striped accordingly? It was indicated that there are some ADA places there. Is there going to be signage there appropriate to designate those? Those are types of things that you can still look at. They need to demonstrate that they will be fully compliant with all the regulations that pertain to businesses there. And you can certainly look at the overall impacts. These impacts pulled together, do they still comply?
Given what you just stated, and the fact that, as you phrase it, the compounding effect of everything, and that we've been given a number of statutes that just take effect today, I would like to make a motion that we table this till next meeting, and that the period of time between now and then, that staff researches the entire process, etc., maybe including our legal counsel to see what the options are. That's a motion that we table this.
I guess before you get into that, though, the other question at hand is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this is an R3, so the planning board has to approve that part of it. So that's the other thing that we need to address. And if under R3 for a retail, it is planning board approved. So we would have to approve that part.
No, we don't have to.
Or well, fair enough.
That's what Dennis was saying, is that we don't have to based on,
but that's a part.
Mitigating factors.
Correct, but that's a part of the.
Well, I think
defensible reasons for not approving have to be present.
And we have to conduct some research to determine if there are or are not.
There's a motion on the floor. I believe it's been seconded. Any further discussion?
So the motion is to table to conduct research.
All in favor? All right, that motion carries. It's tabled now. Ken, why do we have a second item that reads almost the same?
The second item has to do with a separate, again, separate standalone business, which would be a professional service. The issue that came to me as I reviewed this particular permit is that on the one hand it says personal service businesses, and then it's associated with, excuse me, I'll get my notes right. I'm looking at the last permit. On the permit itself, we got the name of the proprietor, we have the request for a professional services business, which again would be legal in an R3, but it goes on to stipulate in his role as a marijuana caregiver, medical marijuana caregiver, and then also states as a note as a sole proprietor. So now we have the mixing of retail and the medical marijuana stuff that we really have to look to the code and say, okay, we know we can't do retail marijuana. I don't know if we can do consulting now. We've got these new laws and regulations here in front of us. I know by the new regulation, as a code enforcement officer, I'm allowed to ask if someone is registered or not registered, but that's confidential, so I can't do it in mixed company. My advice really at this point is to ask for a moratorium from City Council until we can study these laws, until we know how to act on it, or adopt ordinance that allows us the latitude to deal with it.
If I can ask, Mr. Richardson, do you have two proposals in to us or just one?
Two. One was for the glass store, and one was for to sell marijuana to my patients, to pretty much be open to you guys. So if you guys want to come in, see what's going on in there. He's been over there. He haven't seen the whole thing, but if
okay,
y'all
now,
want to.
If I can ask a couple of questions. So one is the glassware. The other is to sell marijuana to medical patients only, or medical patients only?
The ones who are signed up under me, yes, sir.
So just you alone?
I thought...
Now, here's the thing, though. Like, the laws just passed. I have an employee already, but now I can have unlimited employees now. So I'm going to be hiring more people in there to work for me in there. You know what I mean? So that was going to be like its own caregiver service. And then on the other side, there's the glass store, which I was going to hire separate employees and separate things in there. That way somebody can run that store too.
But those are just people who are provided care under you, correct?
Yes. For the patients.
Right. I guess I'm puzzled by why you are coming to us for permission to sell
marijuana
medically to medical patients. I thought that you had...
I could do
cut
that,
down
but...
to do that anyway. Why do you need us? Or am I missing something?
That's what I don't understand.
I don't understand either.
We got items D, which we just tabled, item E, which reads the same thing over again.
Well, but I'm just...
No, that was considered to pass that one. The second permit application happens below that.
So let's go back. So what led you to think that you needed to come to us for
another caregiver, but they're in a different part of the state. So, for example, if I wanted to go to Bangor, the city of Bangor, and
we're actually
get a store down there, since I don't have a store down there already, I'll have to get a certificate of occupancy to do it, and they can approve or not, pretty much. So,
for medical marijuana.
Yeah, that's like in like their zones over there. Since I'm on an R3, I guess I really don't need one. But I would just come in here to pretty much be open.
I guess I don't know.
Our conversation is outrageous on our agenda.
Okay. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that about Bangor? If you went to Bangor,
if I was to go down to Bangor, like new people was to go to Bangor, any city, they would need one of these to operate.
Okay.
But I guess since I've been doing it for years, I don't need one. But I'm just here, so I'm just letting you guys know I'm here, so that way if you guys ever wanted to.
In my statute, he can continue doing the medical marijuana as a caregiver.
Yeah, I know.
So that's why I was puzzled why it was even on the agenda.
Just
because he could hire more staff.
So before I got the new regulations, I looked in our code book, and I didn't see where it was either in our power to approve or disapprove.
Okay.
Because we're working with state statute, our code book is silent.
It sounds like we just need a moratorium from the city council. We need them to basically say, this is what you can do, this is what you can't.
And that's what it says in the new edits to the law, that we can have that moment and allow the legislative body to either adopt or ordinance.
I say we shouldn't keep talking about this because we really have no direction to go until the city council, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I might be wrong here, but until the city council says to us, this is the direction we would like this to go, because this body can only, it's like last meeting with the whole massage thing, we can only do what we can on the ordinance we have. That's all we can do. And it sounds like there's just so much up in the air with this topic. We just need a little bit more information, and we need a little bit more structure to it.
That
gives
would be
gives them more structure. It gives this body.
That would be my advice. You know.
So then, by tabling item D, have we effectively taken care of E at the same time?
Correct.
Yes.
Well, see, this is what I don't understand. What is the difference between D and E?
Because one was public hearing, and then one was consider the use thereof. The use permit for.
Well, I think we did them both at the same
Same
time.
time, yeah.
We combined them.
All right, so we tabled both.
One was the public hearing, one was the.
Now, as to the moratorium, do we need to generate a letter to city council requesting
I think
the moratorium? And
I-
how do we do the wording? Do we ask the council for a moratorium word for word, or do we ask them to generate it?
No, I think
We recommend to the council that they do a moratorium.
But we have to say on what? And I think we have to say what.
Ask Mark.
So, I might interject there. So, relative to the existing operation that's there, a moratorium is not going to affect them. They can continue
That's
to
true.
operate
Fully
the way
understood.
they have been, not adding to it,
Right.
but at least maintaining the operation as it is now. In the event of trying to expand it, that's where you could say you can't expand it because you have to just operate the same way you were under the laws that existed before all of this went into effect. But definitely, as a planning board, you can now forward a motion to the city council to please, knowing that we now have new medical marijuana laws in place, our code is generally silent on the issue. We need to make sure that's all taken care of before any additional requests come in for new or expanded operations.
You don't have any glassware inventory now, and you haven't been selling it, right?
I do actually.
But you haven't been selling it. So you can.
I didn't know I had to get like a thing for this, so I was doing it. That's why I was coming here.
We definitely need to. So should we write one to the city council, a moratorium saying, this is what's going on, this is what we need clarification on, and at this point, it sounds like you can go ahead and do your caregiver work, as you have been, but as far as any selling of glassware and everything, that kind of needs to stall. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Along with expanding the amount of caregivers that you're planning to hire, you'll have to put a hold on that as well. Because that doesn't fall under how you were operating prior to, based on these new laws, so.
It's difficult for me to be in this position because we have ordinance, the public has an opinion on everything and we can't act upon it. And tempers flare, but we can't do anything because all this body does is look at the ordinances, we implement them. So.
As far as anybody writing something, I think that's where we first have to have some research done and consult with our legal counsel, etc., so that, because I'll tell you, we at this table are not prepared, educated to write anything.
I think I know how I want to handle it.
So a moratorium will give us 90 days plus additional time if you do an ordinance.
Well,
that
I
takes
think
its time as well.
I think we've accomplished the tabling tonight. I think I would ask staff to come with a proposed moratorium, wording thereof, to the next meeting. If we like the wording, we'll send it to city council.
Should we move on this quicker to get a moratorium? Because if other people are going to bring up,
These
there's
new
this
laws
tension.
are in effect today.
So we might see an influx of businesses. So if we had
by the new laws, he's right. He can have unlimited staff. He can do all these things by state statute right now.
Okay, so then why
But
are we just spending?
unless we do a moratorium and have our legislative body act.
Right,
that's going to happen quick. I mean,
We need to ask for
how
a
do you
moratorium
propose to
tonight.
make that happen quick? Is what I'm saying. when the city council doesn't even know that we're talking moratorium at this point?
1/7 of them does.
Are you on yet?
Not yet.
No, you will be on January 1st.
So the first city council meeting will be the 13th of January. That's when the council can take it up. And you don't need to have a letter come back to you necessarily to then approve to send to them. You just say,
Okay,
you
I'm
recommend
just-
a moratorium. and you
Okay,
take it to
and they implement it.
The council's first meeting is when, Dennis?
Be that second Tuesday of January.
The 8th?
Well, but technically, we still need a motion to ask city council for a moratorium.
I make a motion we ask the city council for a moratorium on the current legislative marijuana laws that came out effective today and how we should act upon them as the planning board.
I'll second that.
All in favor? All right.
So we still got to take care of, under new communication, letter B. Would that be tabling that?
That's encompassing, we basically took care of D and E, and then we moved down to B
Okay.
with the second set of questioning.
So that's
I brought that second permit
Correct.
the way I did because we really needed the information in
clear.
front of us.
Just want to make sure that's clear, just so it's taken care of.
Okay, so we're done talking about marijuana tonight.
If I may close out with something, I can assure you that we will still maintain and follow the laws accordingly. The only thing that we won't be able to do is set up, our glass shop separately, but we'll continue to do our services, which is we only service our patients. It won't be to,
That's your legal right. You guys are business owners, you can do that.
And we will study up on the rest.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you guys so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do we want to, Mr. K-Rod? Was that your last name? We did have the airport
We already had it.
Yes.
at the first,
We
so
moved
it was
up
moved around.
because, and nothing much was talked about.
I was seeing a patient.
Yeah, we moved it up because the gentleman needed to get to one of these ubiquitous holiday concerts.
It's just a general discussion about the airport.
He basically told us who they were and what they were looking at, and that was the end of it.
Super. So just if I can kind of like add a tail end onto that, it's just, I hope that there's always great interest in keeping this gem of an airport that you have up and running.
Oh, I sure hope so.
Great qualities. I mean, having flown all around the state myself, this airport is a really great one. The physical plant is great. The crosswind runways make it easy for pilots to come in. The quality of the runways is great. The landing lights are great. The fuel service is convenient. It's one of the things that got me to come and work here to begin with, and to move here and buy a house. Just for your consideration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We do appreciate that.
Very much appreciate your comment, and as a licensed pilot, I concur with you.
And I listened to the traffic frequency on my scanner, and I find it very interesting.
I'm temporarily grounded. I've got parts of my engine on my dining room table right now.
I hope your wife is happy with
Well,
that.
they're supposed to be. Try to take to the air again. Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you.
So by way of a really brief staff report, the Bird's Eye complex is rubble on the ground.
Yes.
Virtually all torn down except the old boiler building still standing.
Yep.
A smokestack still standing, and two tanks. And so these are large gauge metal structures, and they're figuring out
some time
finer
to cut 'em
points
out.
of how to push them over without causing all kinds of other damage. So so that work is ongoing.
These tanks contain what?
At one time, they contained oil.
Oh, okay.
Anhydrous ammonia creates its own oil. It just does it. And
Thank you,
so
sir.
you have to drain that off, or you're going to end up getting higher head pressure in the refrigeration system, and it's a mess.
So we might have found some value in that scrap, and that the snowmobile guys are interested in maybe using some of that material for culverts.
Interesting.
Interesting.
We do also have to do A, right, under new communication?
Yeah, we still have to talk about
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Caribou Senior Living.
Okay, so that can be brief as well. we had some confusion out the door that we didn't sign off on a building permit. I can actually sign on your behalf on the building permit with your approval, but what we didn't do was a site design review. So I wanted to keep that in everyone's mind that when we get more of a plan, because this is a very preliminary plan, that we'll need to do a site design for that project.
When they do get around to submitting it, I have faith that they will do a good job.
I think it will be top-notch.
Based on what they provided, I mean, for this package, they've got,
And then
like
we
they've
won't,
got their ducks in a
so
row.
we won't get into all kinds of big hoo-ha's about whatever. All right, so that's nothing more on that right now. How about the old abandoned house over behind the rec center? Is that gone down yet?
No, but we got kind of tangled up at the end of the year budget for that. We used most of our demolition budget on the Bird's Eye plan.
Yeah.
So as we move closer to this year's new budget, which has been accepted, I've got Shane McGillen who's going to knock that down for us.
I still. Which one is it? It's the
It's
abandoned
the one on 26 Liberty, 25 Liberty.
Okay.
I thought all fall that the fire department could have used that for training, but.
It's awful close to one house.
Oh, is it?
In the backyard.
Did you make your slurry in the, with all the wood chips and sawdust and stuff? How'd that go?
Yeah, he's got to cake up the sludge, the effluent, whatever you want to call it, with I forget how many yards of ash that we got from Ashland. I think he's done it. I think it's all in there. He'll have to pound down. That structure was explosion proof because it generated methane. It's got rebar the size of my wrist all through it, 6 inches on the center. It's rugged. So he's got to.
Interesting.
He's got to get, an attachment for his excavator that can pound that down.
Oh, one of those air things. The neighbors are going to love that noise.
And we're also looking at a brownfield grant to continue the demolition of slabs and so forth and make that a developable site.
So, where are we?
Staff report.
He just did it.
Continue work.
Dennis has parked himself up here. It looks like he's ready
Well,
to start on something.
So we want to talk about Chapter 13, and what we noticed late in the day, this thing almost killed us trying to print it off. It crashed Denise's computer. It's been through so many renditions of Windows. It's been crashed on a server. It's been risen from the dust and the ashes. But late in the day, we had it all printed out, and we realized the land use tables don't match. And the land use table doesn't match the text, and it doesn't match the map. So we need to stop for a second and look at our land use tables, and Dennis can help us with that.
So,
I think we'll be able to see it on the screen.
Oh,
I'll follow along.
Take one and pass it down?
Yeah.
Well, I have something for new business as well, before we scoot down the agenda. That's fine.
so do I.
So one of the first things that I was involved with when I came to Caribou was helping us put together the proposed zoning map with the planning board and starting to look at the land use table. And based on the discussions that we had, this map was put together, and it's the one that's before you. And on the map, there is a proposed zone titled Public Use Zone, or the dark blue. And while it's on the map right now, we don't have any text to support the creation of that zone right now, which is not it's a major thing in that you can't have something shown on the map without having text to support it. But as far as the uses that were contemplated, I believe, in that zone, those same uses are already allowed in other zones that we do have text for. And so I think you could on the map, show a different zoning in place on those same properties, and we won't have to delay at least that element of the Title 13 rewrite. We could just say the high school, instead of in a public use zone, is going to be in the R1 zone or the R2 zone.
Whatever surrounds it. Yeah.
Right.
If I If I remember correctly, I remember you proposed this, and then I remember at a meeting that you were not present, we looked at the public use zones and decided to call the schools a school zone, and I think the airport an airport zone.
We didn't know where the new school was going to go, I think, right?
No, we did at that point because that's why we
Which-
carved out the
And
the
so
little parcel.
Which is
on
fine.
Glen Street.
If you just have to have, if you have a zone, you need to have text to support that being on the map. And that's why I say if we don't have the text right now in Title 13 and you want to move it on, you need to probably rezone those or represent them in a different zone.
The only two public zones are the high school and where the new school's going to be.
Correct.
Correct.
Can we just change public, strike that out, and put school? And then
could
do
be all
the-
the
We don't have a definition for school though either.
Why not? You do. Why not?
Do we have a school
So-
zone definition?
Okay, again, back up. There's definitions for the land uses. There's creation of the zones and the regulations within the zones, right? There's how you represent those on the map, and then you have the land use table. And the land use table calls out all the different land uses that are permitted in that zone. Right now, we have a definition for public and private schools in the Title 13, okay? And those are generally permitted in every single zone. Okay, you don't need a separate creation of a public school zone right now to represent that they are permitted uses in the city. But you don't have the text around a school zone or a public use zone to point to. Do we have text around MU, municipal use?
That's mixed use.
Mixed use zone.
excuse
me, I thought it,
Yeah.
I just
No, we don't.
misread it, I'm sorry. Never mind.
So basically what you're saying, Dennis, is if we revert these back to the closest associated zone that they're in, that based on our land use table, we're gonna be covered anyway.
Right.
That's the long and the short of it, more or less.
Just make
Yes.
them mixed use or make them R2, either one.
So we just need a different color on the map for those properties because we don't have a public use zone regulations in the text.
If we made them an R1 or an R2, whatever's there would still be covered.
Right.
Right.
I think that that's what we should do.
It's the simplest solution. Hi, Matt.
It could go. Which one is more permissive? It's the R. Yeah, R2.
The R1 is primarily anticipated to be single-family zone, but again, you allow schools in the R1 zone, so it doesn't matter if it's R1 or R3, schools would still be permitted uses.
And the majority
Maybe a long
touching
time.
those units would be an R1. I mean, the majority of land abutting the high school area is an R1. I mean, granted, it's all R3 behind it, but by that same nature,
Oh, it
there's
is
more
R1.
R1 in that area of where the new school's going to be compared to that of, any of the others.
Yeah, I mean, the high school, you could say that's R1 just because it's consistent in the corridor, the New Sweden corridor.
And or we could switch it to mixed use where the new school's going to be. I mean, 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Right.
So
I'm inclined to let the high school location be R1 and have the new school location be mixed use.
I'm fine with that.
Do we need a motion?
No, not yet. More discussion to come, right? I think we'll just go through some of these issues that we've identified, and I think we can take the direction accordingly to make some changes overall. But the other element is that the text of Title 13 right now has reference to a light industrial zone and a heavy industrial zone.
Supposed to clear that out. Just have an industrial zone.
So right now, the text that I was working off of only shows one industrial zone.
Right, because we combined it.
So, and as far as the combining them together, I didn't have a concern with that because the current text, they basically were the same zone. They just had a different name. But I guess I want to raise the issue that right now that means that anywhere there's purple and a use that's identified in the industrial zone can be located in a purple zone. So I just want to make sure that we're all very comfortable with what is currently shown as permitted
in the industrial zone and how that relates to where it's being shown as on the map.
Do you have any specific areas that you think were ill-advised to proceed?
So, for instance, the very first use in the land use table is the abattoir. So I don't know if I pronounce that right. I'm not French of nature. But
Butcher.
it's a slaughter
Slaughterhouse,
facility. Okay, it's not a butcher shop
No, you're right.
like a small downtown thing. It's a larger, livestock slaughter facility. And if you look at your map, anywhere there's purple, that would then be a
Slaughterhouse.
permitted use.
Well, except for the one up by the airport, I don't see an issue with that.
So the one up by the airport is the public works yard.
Yeah, why don't we change that to we don't have municipal, I'm sorry, I keep thinking MU is municipal.
But you look at, you've got industrial,
It's in over by coming out Sincock. I can see
Yep.
where you're looking at that.
right,
Bird's Eye area and
right.
crossed by Lower Linden Street.
So, before heavy and light industrial were combined to industrial, was the slaughterhouse limited to just one of those two
No,
industrials?
it was the same.
Oh. So then the change needs to be made to the slaughterhouse designation to be only like in an R3,
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
as opposed to changing the industrial zones back to heavy and light, leave them combined, but just change the land use table that slaughterhouses can't be in a.
There's different ways you can approach it. You could say only in the R3, but then that opens up every parcel in R3 to that use. You could go back to saying we want to have a heavy and a light industrial, and it's only going to be allowed in the heavy. But then you also have to decide on the map, well, where is the heavy zone going to be?
What if you, can you code it that it's by planning board?
That's currently how it is.
Currently planning board approval,
Oh, well, then we have.
but we have to have criteria that we can vote against.
In a situation of an abattoir, you might want city utilities, sewer and water. So you wouldn't get that necessarily in an R3.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's necessary, because I know a slaughterhouse in Van Buren, I should say in Hamlin, which doesn't have sewer, well, they got a septic system, but they don't have municipal.
With this, I mean, each of these uses, you could come up with a criteria to say, this is unique to that, we need to adopt this into the code at some point, such as, with the abattoir, you might say, you can only locate those if you are a quarter mile or a half a mile away from a single-family structure. In that case, they're probably not going to be in the utility district area and connected to city, or to, not city, but utility district infrastructure. So but again, it's looking at what are the colors on the map, and as it relates to the permitted use designations that are on the land use table, do you want to change that one to the R3? Do you want to create the heavy versus light industrial and then designate those differently on the map?
I don't know if I want to get into that again.
I think if you keep it industrial and we really look at, I mean, let's face it, nobody's going to put a slaughterhouse on Sincock. There's not enough room. Nobody's going to put a slaughterhouse on
There's
Lower
room on
Linden.
Sincock.
Yeah.
Out of Sincock Street.
There's a big vacant building that's going to become on the market here pretty soon.
Yeah.
And you think they're going to put a slaughterhouse?
You don't know.
We don't even know if there's a market for a slaughterhouse there.
Well,
But given the time of year, I think that, I mean, what Dennis is saying makes a lot of sense, but then I think what we need to do as a board, once we fire this up to city council, is go through our land use chart and say, and look at them as we have them, line by line by line, and say, does this make sense with where we have things now? Do we need to change verbiage for this particular use? And try to get that stuff towed in line. I mean, we've done the majority of the grunt work up to this point. But now it's just fine tuning it, you know. As we've said, it's a living document, you know, it's changing all the time. So if we can get the blessing from the council and then have everything taken care of for what we've done so far, then I think we can spend a couple months and spend a little bit of time fine tuning each one of these uses and, you know, the definitions, and if we need to change where they're allowed.
And so another option that you could look at is you print that one again specifically. That's a good suggestion. But if I might, you could also just say, yes, we'll leave it industrial, but when you come back through that refining process, you're going to add specific regulations to those uses.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking we need to do too.
And I wouldn't exclude it from R3.
No, I wouldn't either. It's
I'd
already
leave
there.
it's in R3 and in I1, and you add your refinements of not within, you know, a half a mile or whatever distance from a personal residence or something like that. And you just use that criteria to grant or deny.
Yep. Which also speaks to what's now been brought up a couple times tonight is if it's in the books and you really can't change anything, why is it coming to you?
Well, I've often wondered that.
I mean, procedurally, if what's been adopted is what everybody's comfortable with, and then the city staff can interpret that the same way, and we could be moving things through the process a lot faster.
I
We're
completely agree.
We're all on the same page there.
So anywhere on the land use table that says PB or planning board review required, what that's saying then is that you're not allowing the staff to implement the codes. It has to come to you, public hearings and so on,
And one
every time you do
version of
that.
this, about a year and a half ago, I eliminated planning board from almost everything and changed it to CEO.
I remember that.
It got changed back. I don't know how.
And I still think there's stuff that needs to come before us.
Well, just make it a lot less.
Right, yeah. But I mean, I still think that there's stuff that needs to come before us, you know, to have a public hearing thereof. You know, even though it may be allowed, that it's going to affect somebody.
Yeah, but unless you have valid reason to deny, you can't deny.
Right.
And so I agree with Dennis.
Yeah. So it's
And as far as the table that you changed a whole bunch to CEO,
I don't know where that is.
I might have that at home.
Well, you look,
I've never seen
just to go back, and
Really?
I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here, but you look at medical marijuana dispensaries in R3, it says no.
Well, our dispensary isn't in R3. It's in a mixed use.
Way out there is a mixed use.
Yes. It is. You got to look at
On
this.
Log Road?
No, that's not a
No,
medical.
the current one.
That's not a dispensary. Dispensary is down in the Presque Isle.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm talking about the current.
The proposal
but it's-
that would be
proposal
discussed
that
tonight.
we're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
That's what was one of those issues, was is it in an R3 and is it approvable?
but that's
But-
under the state code. It's not a dispensary. It's a caregiver facility.
All right. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
that's the difference. Yes.
I mean, you're splitting hairs, but
yeah.
that's kind of what the legislature has done to us. They've split those hairs.
It's been botched all the way around.
It's not getting any better.
It's not going to get us fixed
It's
tonight either.
still evolving.
Yeah.
So this legal dispensary on Route 1, for instance, in, I think it's 2021, there will be no more limitations on dispensaries. You can have as many as you want. They're no longer required to be nonprofit. So they'll be retail businesses. So is that one grandfathered? Or is it legal according to our code? So as these things continue to evolve, and it will, it's coming to a neighborhood near us. We need to be out in front of it and try to be proactive and reactive.
So what else did you have, Dennis?
So I guess something else to just keep in mind is the industrial zone right now where it's shown is on property that in the master plan is not intended to be industrial long term. And so particularly down around the waterfront areas. we don't have, unless you wanted to change that to a commercial zone right now or a mixed use zone. Right now, you're saying that the existing uses, that's what you want to protect by showing that as the industrial zone in place there. Whereas if the intent is to move forward with some other type of waterfront development, commercial or what else, your industrial zoning right now would preclude us from doing that.
Well,
Would there be, I mean, effectively anyway, state laws would probably get in the way of introducing industry right there along the river, no matter what we do, right?
Yeah, probably prohibit a lot of things from happening along the waterway.
So if we run off everything but industry, and the state says you can't do industry, you're basically rendering it the whole thing useless if we don't change it from industrial.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think given the shoreline zoning laws and the amount of real estate that's down there.
well, I think, I agree that we need to look at the map and change some of these areas identified as industrial to something other than industrial. Mixed use would be the most flexible.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I've always thought a restaurant, I mean,
And I guess I would suggest, as far as the waterfront is concerned, right now that's probably a safe zone to show there, in that nothing's probably going to happen there under that zoning. But once, and I know that sounds contrary to what I've just said, is you want to permit things to happen there, but you also probably want to create a special waterfront development zone.
Yeah, if anybody comes in with a proposal, I think that would be the time for us to create that zone.
Well, I would be a little more proactive in that, create the zone ahead of time, get it in place, and then you can go out and start
And that was a part
drawing
of the
people to
plan
it.
that we did a couple of years ago for the vision and mission of the city to develop that. So I think it makes sense to include something to promote that.
Right. And so rather than just say, we're going to just zone it commercial, that could open up the door to a use going on there that's not in the vision, or that could prevent the vision from reaching its full potential just by too early rezoning that or showing that as something else than industrial. But just as a point to bring up, as far as strategically, there's probably needs to get created a waterfront development zone that outlines the standards for, the intensity of the uses you want to have there, the allowed uses. To just say you'd be okay with a restaurant there, well, a restaurant's going to occupy potentially 2 acres of ground there that would be a single-story building surrounded by parking. And is that the type of development you want to see right there next to the waterfront? A restaurant's a restaurant, but is there some other potential there that you might be limiting yourself by? So, just
well, and that's why I had mixed use.
Yep.
Keep it as flexible as possible.
The mixed use zone, and I agree, mixed use is great, but the mixed use zone right now would permit single story standalone businesses that could occupy a large amount of ground that would not get you maybe the vertical elements that you're hoping for down there.
Well, you could, I don't know if this is viable or not. I've never personally thought that riverfront development was viable down there anyway, because the only strip that makes any sense is between the shoreline and the railroad, and that's a pretty narrow strip of land.
Well, you've got potential out off of the intersection of Dow Siding Road.
Mm-hmm.
There's potential there too. Dow Siding Road is a dead end road that's across from Union Convention Center. There's potential all up and down that river in order to make things work.
Yeah, but out there it's not zoned. It's not zoned in such a way that would prohibit it.
It's not industrial.
It's all R3.
Right, but I think what Dennis is trying to say is for us to think about having a waterfront or a riverfront zone in order to do something like that. So we've got that tool in the bag in place so we don't get caught.
Sure.
Right.
I guess I don't know what's being proposed.
But it's just a food for thought item that as you start looking at the map now and the uses that are permitted in these different zones and the land use table, just be very mindful that as you go through that line by line, you can't just say, well, a library, yeah, we want to permit a library right in the mixed-use downtown area. And this is a bad example, but that also means a library could pop up, according to this, in the industrial zone or somewhere else, or, you know. And
Yeah, there's a million things going on that could happen and that we should talk about someday, we keep saying. But every time we start doing that, the implication is we're going to not put forth the new zoning to city council. And, you know, it's like the Pope and Michelangelo. He would always go in to the Sistine Chapel and say, when will you be done? You know, so are we going to keep playing with this, and never put Chapter 13 to city council? Or are we going to do as was suggested at the last meeting, put it to city council and fix it afterwards?
Well, they're trying to put it. They're trying to make it a little more.
Yeah, Dennis was I think Dennis. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dennis, but I believe Dennis's biggest concern was on the map is that we don't have an explanation for the blue for the public use.
We've already took care of that.
Right.
Right.
So if you got the waterfront zone, you need like a narrative, a purpose, and then you permit a variety of uses consistent with the purpose.
Yeah, I understand how that works, but is that the work of generating that new stuff going to further delay getting this decision?
It was food for thought.
I think that one you hold off until after the council's looked at these other things, and certainly you could, like I said, forward this on. So I know we've talked about not doing the ag zone. We've talked about not doing a public zone right now. It sounds like you're okay just having the one industrial zone at this point, and needing to come back and refine the regulations within those zones. There are several land uses there, as I pointed out in the coloration. The red ones, I would recommend that they be deleted from the land use table. Those uses, by definition, are already included in other uses that are in the table.
You mean the rose-colored ones?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also agree with the comment on the second page about yes everywhere for the church, synagogue, and or parish house. Because that's the law.
Right.
Right. And I would recommend, as far as that term, church, synagogue, and or parish house, we change that term to religious institution.
Yeah, sure.
It's just consistent with the federal law, but and it would include all of those things. The yellow ones were terms that would recommend adding, and we've got some simple definitions we can throw in there with it.
Yep.
But I think other than that, we can make the change on the map that were discussed tonight, the mixed-use zone and the R1 zone. Make those minor changes to the land use table. But definitely, as soon as possible, it would be good to look at each of these individual uses, and are there specific concerns that you might have with those that we need to make sure get addressed in the text themselves.
Okay.
Bob, if I may, real quick. I know we're deleting agricultural product storage, and because it's already defined in agricultural product processing, I get a little leery about having any of that done in the industrial zone for the sole fact that some of these chemicals, ammonium nitrate, I mean, a lot of farmers are using calcium ammonium nitrate, but still there's a lot of explosive value to that stuff. And do we really want that close to houses? Do we really want that over by Birdseye or down by the riverfront or over by Mekon and all that over there?
So the whole thing already came up for discussion because it's already happening over there.
Where?
well, I can't tell you specifically where, but there was a discussion we had.
That never happened. That building,
Oh, that
that
never
use of that particular building, they never came to
Never mind.
fruition, no.
Okay.
I just think if we just say no in the industrial area for that, I mean, or say this, it can go to the planning board. However, storage of any destructive substances, like what Cavendish has over in Fort Fairfield Easton area. I just like wording there because
That's one of those definitions we can look at.
I would, because there's been horror stories of the plants exploding, and I mean, if they want to have sales offices, all that stuff, absolutely knock yourself out.
So typically what I've seen is you have the descriptions of the zones, right? And then you'll also incorporate into your Title 13 additional ancillary regulations. And under that, you may list, for abattoirs, these are additional things that pertain to that use. For agricultural storage facilities, these are additional things that pertain to those. Right.
A good person to talk to about that would be Darren Woods over the emergency.
Yep.
Because he knows all of that, and he could tell us, he could give you a better example of that. Because if you're going to have any sort of anhydrous ammonia storage units, the ammonium nitrate, it seems like anything that has ammonium,
That's dangerous.
it's dangerous.
Sure.
So that's my 2 cents.
Well, we can also incorporate in the map the changes we made by the rezoning in the Hilltop area and Washington Street.
Oh, yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Yeah, some changes have already occurred, and that needs to be reflected on this map.
So if we're going to build a new official zoning map, we
Just need to move some colors.
in there are additional areas. We started kind of brainstorming as we're sitting there looking like this. It's like there's a new industrial complex, really, this Otterberg gravel pit on the Van Buren Road. He's not only mining minerals, he's making other products there. He's doing
Hot top.
Yep.
Which is allowable under R3.
Yep.
So
It is.
Yeah, well, that's okay. Better out there than downtown.
But should that be industrial, or should it be?
I
It's allowed in R3.
personally don't care.
It is his main yard. Should that be industrial? Spending that use for
It's not
70 years.
Yeah, and it's not an issue. It's not something it's not a burning conflict between two parties.
As we saw earlier tonight.
Well, and I mentioned this to Denise and Ken earlier today. Your R3 zone basically becomes a whatever you want zone,
Yes.
an unregulated area of the city.
And it's because it's out of the city.
Right.
It's out of the area where we want to be really careful what we do.
And it's, until you get the conflicts with the neighbors that are out there, you're right, it's not going to be an issue.
And then we have to look at who was there first.
No, you have to look at what did the regulations permit.
Well, yeah, given that, but people who come
Yeah.
in and then say, "Oh, we don't like that." Well, sorry.
Right.
Now, I don't want to cut you short, but we have a couple more items that these guys want to discuss.
I just wanted to say thank you to Tom and Matt for their service to the planning board.
You took the words out of my mouth, sir.
Is that it?
That's all I had.
Seal and thunder.
Thank you, gentlemen.
thank you.
Good luck in golf and good luck on the city council.
It'd be fun. I'd rather play golf, but
My turn?
I guess.
Okay, and actually, what we just discussed a moment ago here, as far as, who came first, and until you have unhappy neighbors or something. No, I view the purpose of the planning board is to try to establish some ground rules to permit everybody to be happy and not be upset with their neighbors. And what I heard earlier this evening, as far as the odor problem, surrounding the medical marijuana growing place, I was thinking about the fact that, okay, our ordinances have very specific guidelines and rules as to how far a pig farm has to be away from residential area because of offensive odors.
There's actually an ordinance on noxious plants and so forth.
And so I'm thinking that, this whole, and I don't like the way that the legislature brought this medical marijuana thing into existence, because it blindsided us and it prevented us from being proactive and saying, no, you can't have this offensive odor product within, an eighth of a mile or a quarter of a mile of any other residence. But I think we need to look at that, because clearly what upset everybody that was here tonight was the odor. That was number one. Yes, they had concerns about traffic and parking, but the park
and illicit drug use.
Right, but I think that the number one thing is the odor, and I think that Bob Lord's got a point when he says, "Who's going to want to buy my house if it smells like skunk urine all the time?" These people have been financially damaged, and so I don't know what tools we have, but I would want that as part of the investigation of these new medical marijuana laws. Is let's look at the whole scene here, which is we've got offensive orders that have taken financial value away from neighbors, and what can we, if anything, can we do?
And I would just quickly say that we need to be very careful to say that there has been financial damages. We don't know that.
No, we
for
don't.
sure.
Right.
We would assume it might
Granted,
be the
but
case, but we
because-
don't know for sure.
Because
Agreed.
similar to what Dennis just said, I mean, one of the things Laurel spoke about at the last meeting was that if somebody has a home occupation, there's the potential to decrease property value where they're at. Now,
Maybe, maybe not.
Right.
Depending
that
on
remains to be seen. So that's a variable that we don't know until somebody does try to do something.
What bothers me the most is that it seems like there's a lot of folk in this community, not a lot, but a few, that just do stuff without checking the ordinances. And they just go ahead and just do stuff.
I think you were probably closer to right with a lot than a few.
Yeah, well, neither here nor there.
But
But
I would
still,
think,
what are we gonna do about it?
a small fraction of the people in the city of Caribou have ever really heard about the Caribou Code book.
I think,
Smaller
well,
still have read it, any part of it.
in regards to what are we going to do about it, I suggested last time that there be penalties.
Absolutely.
That if somebody come in to get permission after the fact, that there be severe financial penalties.
Well, how
But
about
we saw that tonight, and there
There's-
was
there is a penalty.
illegal, and we can't.
cease and desist order?
No, there is a penalty, and it's written in the code book that if you come to get a permit after the fact, your permit fee is not $50; it's doubled. It's $100.
Oh, that's not enough.
Well, but that's the way it's written in the code.
We've had that discussion recently, and actually,
Yeah.
we just did that the other day, that there was
Oh,
an
I think
addition
it
on
ought
the
to be
Paul
10
Bear
times.
Well, then
Never mind 2 times.
But I mean,
Seriously.
because everybody was concerned about fees this, fees that, and I remember seeing the discussion through city council with regards to fees. So instead of taking X amount of dollars based on the value of your project, they made it $50, and by that, they tried to do that to be more business friendly and try to make people happy, so that somebody doesn't have to pay $2,500 to build a strip mall or whatever.
Right,
But by that same token, those same people who were complaining about those fees won't come in and spend the $50
no, you
to
don't
take
know
care
if
of
it's
that.
the same people.
Well, I'm just saying, and generalizing.
Can't.
So I
Dennis,
mean,
this whole do it and ask for forgiveness later is an old farmer trick, and I've seen it through the ages as I've been growing
Well, it
up.
makes us no different from Montana.
Not just
Iowa,
farmers.
and-
No,
It's not just farmers.
If you put the enforcement authority in a board, you're going to get weird, inconsistent,
Yeah.
slow results. You need all the enforcement authority to be in
Right there.
one person,
right.
and then not second guess them in front of the
Well, the
public.
problem with that is the root part of that word is force. You're trying to force someone to do something on their own property. So I try to remember that.
Yeah.
In the Constitution of the United States gives us the authority to look out for the well-being, general well-being of our people.
In the town of
That's the only thing that lets us
yeah,
enforce these.
in the town of Hopkinton, Mass, where due to nothing I had anything to do with, but people that preceded me by a generation, they wrote zoning laws, they put in a very strong planning board, and they put in a code enforcement officer, and this after the fact forgiveness stuff doesn't happen, because anybody starts anything, it's a cease and desist order, bang, you're done.
But that
Until
takes,
you do it right.
That would probably take more manpower to be out there policing,
We got
looking
one-
for things.
You got one person down there, full-time job, 15,000 population.
All they do is ride around looking for projects that are going on, and there's no permit
Is
on
there
the books.
anything in the budget to send Ken to the academy?
That's probably about $26,000, Tom.
Anyway, it can be done, but the city council needs to say, all right, this is how we're gonna operate.
I feel your pain.
All right, I'm in the dog.
A motion we adjourn.
I tell you that. We are
Second.
adjourned.
Gentlemen, have a Merry Christmas.
You guys do this, all of us.
You know what?